Yes, you have just lost Ollie.
Yeah, so Oliver was the love of my life. My little black lab has been with me every day since, let's see, I picked him up on December 15th in a snowstorm. I traveled across from Seattle to the Tri-Cities in a snowstorm because it was a 10-year-old birthday. So I wanted to have, I wanted to give my son Jager a birthday gift of a dog, and so I braved all the elements. It was a major snowstorm. It took me like 3 hours to get out there and 3 hours to get back, and but it was really it was amazing, and he was the best dog I could ever have been blessed with. It was super loving and kind and gentle and intuitive and always just there as support. And um, and so it was really hard going into the last 6 months, just watching him kind of lose all of his doggy abilities, his ability to just stand and eat and just do basic functions. And then the last 6 weeks were really heartbreaking because I saw him really lose control over everything. His bowels, his bladder. He didn't want to eat. So we were just trying to do everything we can to make his life as pleasant as possible. My idea was that if he could die naturally, I I think that would have been amazing. But I also didn't know. I've never gone through this before. I've had pets growing up, but my parents always took them and put them down before they, as soon as
Yeah,
they start losing any sort of function, they put them down, immediately.
yeah, yeah,
And I was always blown away because I was never part of that process. And then so all
yeah,
of a sudden, I'm having to make that decision myself, and I'm caught between being selfish for my own personal needs, not wanting to say goodbye to him, and looking out for what would be in his best interest, which is, he's not enjoying life. I mean, I'm sure he enjoys being around Rachel and I, but he can't get up. He's laying down. He's frustrated, and I could tell he's frustrated because he wants to move, but he can't really move. He can't get himself up. And if he stands up, he falls down. If he sits up, he falls down. So, but we felt like if he could die naturally, that would be ideal. And then the last couple of days, he basically just it just got so bad. He started having these seizures, and they were mild at first, and then they got more severe. And I would say they got more into becoming tremors
oh
and
yeah,
quite possibly convulsions. I just didn't know because his he would lose control of his body. It would just spaz out, and I would be like trying to hold him and comfort him and things like that. And then I figured was really strange was he would go in and out of that. Like those would last for, a few hours, and then he would be fine. And then he would like perk up and his head would come up. He'd look all fine. Everything was looks like it was going to be okay. But then all of a sudden he would slip back into it. And then that became the pattern, and that pattern grew and grew and grew. And it got to a point where he literally was 24/7 just having these seizures. Um, and then last night, the night we put him to sleep, he was he was having a bad convulsion, and I heard him whimper. And when I heard him
mm,
whimper, I was like, you know what? I
mm,
can't have him go down. I can't have him die in pain. That's not what I want. So, I immediately grabbed him and brought him to the ER, and I held him in my arms as they put him to sleep, and so he died in my arms. And then it was quite upsetting. I think I cried for an entire day, just laid in bed, and just mourned him. And then I woke up and I just said, he's in a good place. He's where he needs to be. He had a great life. I did everything I could. I have no regrets, and I felt like it was time to just let him go. And I'll always hold on to him in my heart. And I have memorabilia. I've got pictures of him, and I've kept his collar, and we'll sprinkle his ashes out in the Puget Sound because that's where he used to love to play, and out on the beach and stuff. So I'll do that. And but it's sad, almost makes me want to cry thinking about it. But it's I figured the 6 weeks leading up to his death, I probably cried a dozen times thinking that it was the end. And then just seeing him just fall apart like that was really sad. And so I started to cry over that. And so I just felt like I mourned so much during the process that when he finally died, it was almost like a sense of relief that it was over, that the pain was over. And because I really want to just celebrate his life. I just, there's nothing to be sad about. He had a great, amazing life. I mean, I'm sad that he's not with me, but that's my own selfishness, but I think that it's the right thing to do is to, you know, make sure that I he goes, I celebrate his life versus, looking at it as sadness.
It's so, first off, you know, opening your platform, your podcast to share with me this very thing. Yeah, there's so many things I want to say. First off, starting with thank you for sharing all of that with me, because that's a really like vulnerable, heartfelt conversation that our generations were not raised around that. Like you said, your parents took care of it. You didn't see the process of what took place and the way we were raised around animals. Most of us at the time, the generations of 60s, 70s, 80-year-old, 80-year periods, matter of fact, our parents weren't raised to like, oh, we're going to nurture. Veterinarian medicine hadn't advanced until the late 80s, early 90s. Truthfully, specialty items didn't come into play. It was like you went to the family vet, if you had a family vet, and you put them down, like you said, before it got to what the process was. But also in the 80s, 90s is when we started to make our family pets, where
Mhm.
we integrated them in a way that we made it more acceptable. And many would still look at you like, who are those crazy people who have their pets sleeping in bed with them, or they're constantly integrating in their life and traveling with them to hotels and doing all the things, because we realized, we came into consciousness that they really are an important factor in our lives. They are the ones who are always there with us. They are the ones who go through all the life shifts that we go through. They are our steady, joined at the hip best friend. They are the ones who are there when you cry and you laugh and you grow and you go through your rehabs and divorces and births and your highs and your lows. They're always there,
Yeah.
really constant on our lives.
Yeah, it's an
And yet we have,
unconditional love. It's that it's the you don't really even get unconditional love with the person you're in love with, your
oh
relationship.
no,
It's like
it's
everything's
we're not
conditional.
capable. We're
Yeah,
capable, but we don't work that way.
that's right. And
We don't
so, but
function.
this is one of those relationships where it's unconditional. Like, it's like that dog is gonna love you whether you beat it, starve it, or do whatever you can to it. It is still going to be there for you and love on you. And that's the sad part is when people mistreat these animals and all they know is love and loyalty, and it's just like, geez, it's like an angel. Like, why would you do
Guided
that to an
spirits.
angel?
Yeah, it's spirit guide. Well, I believe that they are spirit guides in
Yeah,
body and out of body. And I believe that they are our teachers. I do believe that they do come in and do show us these very gifts that you and I are exchanging about, because our human partners aren't consistently able. It's not that they can't, it's that consistently, like a dog. 10 just because they do, because they just keep showing up. They just keep taking action. They're
Yeah.
consistently there. All the elements we talk about in all of our life choices, our careers, our lifestyles, all the things, they just do it. They don't talk about it. They just do it.
Yeah, yeah, they do.
And they
Yeah,
keep doing it.
they're
And they keep not
quite
disappointing.
amazing. Yeah,
Amazing. Even if they chew up the furniture and dig holes and all that stuff, but the core of who they are is, like you said, loyalty and love. And it's an interesting subject matter because, what you don't know about me is, and think I shared this with Rachel a little bit in our last training, was that um, when I first started writing, it was probably more in a blog formation, and this goes back probably 15 plus years ago now. And I was going through so many website iterations that I lost my blog in the process. But one of the things that I experienced, and we experienced as a couple after we bought our house, about 2 years in, one of our dogs, a dog that I had gotten in Chicago, came out to LA with me and then moved into her home. So when I got her, it was like 1990. I moved to LA in 92. We bought our house in 2004. In 2006, she had this situation happen where she lost the ability to walk on her back legs.
mm,
And I had already grown up with lots of dogs and cats and even showed horses and, just kind of had a range of like lots of animal exposure. And when Sasha lost her ability to walk on her back legs, I went to take her out front and outside of our house along the road, and I grabbed a scarf and I slung it under her tummy and grabbed onto it. And that girl took me down the street like start running. And I was like, oh shit, she wants to go. And I got to keep up. And got her to the corner. And I was like, go, girl. Okay. All right. I hear you. Came home with her. Immediately said to my husband, Randy, I was like, hey, this girl wants to live. She wants to run. We got to figure this out. And it just so happened at the time I was working with this TV personality who actually worked with animals, I had learned about earlier on when I was younger, and then ended up working with, and then reached out to him and told him the situation. And my point of telling this story is that it was a decision that I made in the moment, that I wanted to expand my mind and I wanted to give opportunity to learn and help and all those things that we hope that we show up doing every day. And in this case was something really foreign because I'd never been around an animal who had lost their ability to walk on their back legs. And going back to how we were raised, you would have just taken them to the vet, called it a day.
yeah,
We were doing acupuncture, we were doing Reiki, we were doing water therapy. We did all these things to try to connect her spinal cord, all the things to activate to see if something was going to wake up the whatever.
mm,
And she just kept showing us she wanted to live. And I always say it's in the eyes of the animal. The animal will tell you in their eyes when they're ready.
yeah,
And you have to just pay attention and really be present, and you have to take away all. It's not that you're not going to feel your feelings like you did. You said you started 6 weeks ago, really coming, the reality started coming into your soul and your being, and
yes,
you started taking those layers of that onion and like putting on that next coat and taking off that other coat, and going through your Rolodex of memory bank and your gratitude and your appreciation and all the beautiful experiences that you've had. And I can only imagine. And because I've done it, we've done it multiple times. I think in my adult life, we've put down 7 animals over their lifespans. And my point to this conversation is that we ended up getting a custom-made cart for Sasha via this guidance, ironically, from the oldest cart company up in Seattle in the whole
nice.
entire nation called Canine
Yeah,
Carts. and she took to it like this. And she couldn't live in it, but we could take her to the park, put her in it, strap
Yeah.
her in, and off she would go.
Yeah.
And she affected so many people who would never ever have turned a cheek, would never have ever interacted, would never have ever. And she like so powerfully did things for the next 20 months of her life because of her shift and how she shifted consciousness around her.
Yeah.
And I wanted to like really start writing on animal care and interaction and raising animals and all the things, minus being a veterinarian or a doctor, but being the parent or the owner or the whatever observer of these lives, including, making arrangements in a home when your animals are getting to that place. So because it's important for them to be surrounded by and all the other things that come with that conversation.
Yeah.
My point to it is I am sorry that Ollie has passed, but I, like you, as an observer of the little bits that I got to enjoy and see, ironically, over the last 6 months, to the day of the night before you guys had to put him down. Um, you know, I feel like a channeler of animals, and I've worked with a lot of channelers, and and I think like anything like feng shui, we all know feng shui. It's just some of us are more tuned in. Like
Yeah.
we all know how to take care of our bodies, minds, and souls, but some of us are more tuned in.
Yeah.
Same with this. You chose because of your consciousness to be present, as painful as it was. And because of it, you got to experience all the layers of all the emotions and all the things that I encourage everybody to experience and appreciate because you have been given this gift. You might have sought the gift, but the gift, this is a mutual gift.
Sure.
And how we treat our animals, especially when it comes to the parting ways, so to speak, it really is a learning curve because we as human beings don't get to do this with each other. We don't get to make these choices. And our dogs or our cats or our animals are helping us learn those moral, ethical, selfless moments of getting out of our way emotionally and doing what's best for this soul, this energy source, who, by the way, is not attached to their body because they know that they're going to be around, they're going to transfer, like they're not attached, they're more concerned about us.
Yeah. There's a it was something where when I was growing up, dogs were, they if they outlived their usefulness, let's say, you know, they were put down. It was like we had a dog when I was growing up, and this is a heartbreaking story because I cried for a long time after this when I got old enough to realize what actually happened. But I grew up with a stepdad that was just incredibly dysfunctional. He was an alcoholic. He was abusive emotionally, physically. He used to beat my sister and I. And so, but my job early on, when I turned about 4 years old, was to feed Woofer. And Woofer was this mutt. He was like he looked like a coyote, like a black coyote.
Mm,
He had like a little bit of shepherd in him and collie. It was just a mix of a whole bunch of things. But I didn't know Woofer. I was 4. Woofer was a big. He was an adult dog by then. He was about my age. I think they got him when he had gotten him already as a full grown dog, like a 2-year-old dog. And then next thing I know, he would have the dog out on a run. So he tied a cable from one tree to the other tree in the backyard, and the dog would just run from one side to the other. And then we moved to another town, and we had a bigger yard, and we had half the yard was in the woods. And so his run was actually behind the house, but that was the beginning of the woods. And so he would be in this run behind the house in the woods. No one ever saw him. He was always all alone, and he would just run back and forth. And he had this wooden doghouse. So I'm 5 years old feeding him, 6 years old feeding him, going through the winter. There were some winters where it was so cold, we had 2 feet of snow. I didn't feed him because I was like, it was just too cold to go out there and feed him and stuff. But I was so young, I didn't realize it, and I would lie that I fed him. And he would bark when he was hungry. He'd bark at these rocks in the ground, and he chewed his teeth until they ground down to like the roots. So he was always sort of like in pain, but he'd bark at these rocks when he was very hungry. Bark, bark, bark. But I didn't know that at the time. And so, it's 6 turns into 7. All of a sudden, I'm starting to get to the age where I'm starting to realize that there's something wrong here. Like, this dog has been on its own by itself. No one pays any attention to it except me for that 5 minutes that I run out there and give him food. I never really bonded with him because I was somewhat a little bit afraid of him because he was a bigger dog, and I didn't know how he was, and he was completely untrained. So
Yeah.
it was a really sad situation, and I kind of was traumatized by it. And when I turned to be about 8 or 9, I started to bond with him. I started to um, take him off his leash, take him for walks. He didn't know how to walk. He was just like, I was like this, trying to hold on to him as he's dragging me all
Yeah.
over the place. But I started to bond with him, and I started realizing that, oh my God, this dog never had anything in life. And so I became like really close to him. And then he died. Like, it was like right when I started to like bond with him, my dad took him and killed him. He put him to sleep because his hind legs started to go, and he was wrapped around a little bit of a tree stump, and I had to go over there and push him up underneath of his chain that he was attached to get him free from being wrapped around this tree stump. And he whipped around and he bit my finger.
Mm.
But but I didn't really care that much about it. It startled me. But I knew that it was because I pushed on his hind legs, and it was really painful, and that's why he didn't like bite down or anything. He just nicked me, but it was enough. I still have a scar on my finger from it. My dad took him because of that. Took him and put him down, and I cried for the longest time. Like, I couldn't believe it. Like, I was devastated by it. And then that was my first dog experience. And then I ended up getting the family dog when I had a dog was given to my family. No one was paying attention to him. His name was Fred, and it was really my younger brother had found him, and brought him home, and he didn't want anything to do with him. So I ended up having Fred, and then Fred was a little border collie, and so I took Fred with me when I moved from New Jersey to Seattle. When I got out of the Marine Corps, I took him with me, and and um, and then when I went to college, and I really bonded with him. He was a great dog. I had him for like a good couple of years. I went to college during the day, and I used to live in an apartment complex, and uh, there was a little courtyard in the back. Like, it was like a square apartment complex, but there's a courtyard in the middle. And I used to open it up, and all the neighbors knew him. And I used to put him out there while I went to college. One day, I came back home, and he was gone. Someone had stolen him, taken him, and I was about 20, 21 at the time, and I was just like, I couldn't believe it. I put posters up everywhere. I looked for him everywhere. Never found him. Never saw him ever again. And so about 6 months into it, I finally realized I'm never going to see him again. I broke down, and then I said, I'm never going to have a dog ever again. And I didn't have a dog. And then that, and so Oliver was the first dog that I had. And it was 18 years later, I got this dog. I was 39. I got this dog for my son. So, and then he ended up becoming my dog because my son was allergic to him. and so his fur. So I ended up having to have him, and he ended up becoming my pet. So anyway, that's sort of my history with dogs. It was, you know.
Do you feel that getting Oliver in reflection to having the experience you had with Wolfer and the experience you had with Fred, that Oliver gave you the opportunity to heal
Oh
those
yeah,
those
no,
wounds?
100%. Like, because it's it's just one of those things where I just made it's sort of like how I made the pact to my two sons, my, Jager and Reese, that I was going to be the best dad they could ever have, and so I pride myself on my ability to be a good dad, because my stepdad was a complete, imbecile. So I didn't want to be that way. My stepdad, I grew up with a stepdad. My real dad left me when I was 2, and I never had a relationship with him. But my stepdad is who I grew up with, and he was. So I always said, if I'm the opposite of him, then I'm going to be a good dad. And that's exactly what I did. I'm the opposite of my stepdad, and I hope that he hears this someday. But yeah, I'm the opposite of him, and and so that's how I said about the same thing with Oliver. When I had Oliver, I said, I'm going to do the opposite of what happened. I'm going to really bond right away with my dog. I'm going to stay bonded with my dog for the rest of his life, and I'm going to protect him and make sure he's safe, make sure he doesn't get away from me, make sure he's always in a good place. I always know where he's at. Make sure he's always fed really well. Make sure he's got a good sleeping arrangement. Make sure he's around good people, and all that kind of stuff. So I really kind of overprotected him, but I felt like that is how you're supposed to be, you know.
Of course, and how amazing that you could live that experience, have that evolution, have that consciousness, teach on that. I mean, this has been given to you to use as a life illustration of how your environments can influence and then help you make choices for yourself and others that are based upon what you know works, doesn't work, what you like, what you don't like, what matters, doesn't matter, what serves a purpose, the kind of life you want, which is kindness, love, to be treated well. It starts with, self-care and the care unto others. And it's applicable to all the things that you do and speak on and pride yourself about. So I think it's also a great gift for you to be able to see that with who you are and what you created in your business models and your personal life, but that a dog and a series of dogs literally have laid out, painted this whole picture for you.
Yeah. Yeah, it really, we have lessons in front of us every day if we choose to look at life that way, and so I knew what I didn't want to be like. And so for me, once I made that decision, I said, well, if I know what I don't want to be like, that gives me the freedom to choose how I want to actually be and what is the creation that I want. And so that's where I said, I get to create whatever life I want. It's my choice. I don't have to become a victim of this. I don't have to do things the way other people have done things. I can do everything the way I really think is the right thing, the way to do it. And so and I just knew that there was in life. I grew up in a really um, hard sort of environment because it was just so dysfunctional, and it was hard to really make sense out of a lot of the things that were happening around me. And I just said, you know what, I'm never going to make sense out of this stuff. I'm going to make sense out of what I can make sense out of. So I'm like, that's what I'm gonna do, because there's no way I can make sense out of anything these people are doing. They're alcoholics. They're on drugs. They're dysfunctional. They're abusive. They're disrespectful. They're all these things, and I'm just like, I don't want to be any of those things.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, how old do you think you were when you made that conscious decision? Were you 6, 16, 26?
I think there was a time when I was. This is a really odd story. I've never told anybody this before, and I might have told Rachel, or maybe some other people are really close to me. But when I was about 9, I didn't like my life because my stepdad was, like I said, he was emotionally abusive, and he was always, he's one of those guys. He was like Archie Bunker. He would sit in his chair, drink beer, watch The Odd Couple or anything on sitcoms. He didn't work very hard. He was a Vietnam vet. He was just PTSD. He drank himself to death. I mean, he nearly drank himself to death. He ended up later on, after my mom divorced him, he ended up finding Christ and ended up changing his life around. But when we were growing up, it was very emotional. It was emotionally abusive all the time. Like, I was always put down. I was always made to make. He always tried to make myself feel like as if I was stupid. The only issue was I knew I wasn't stupid because my teachers were like, "You're not stupid. You're like you actually are pretty smart. You should really keep studying and keep going to school and stuff." So I think what really changed my way of looking at myself personally, and what created my own self-esteem was my relationship with coaches, and I think that's why I gravitated towards becoming a coach, because it was my football coaches and my baseball coaches. I excelled in sports, and they so much believed in my abilities and who I was, and I was a good kid, and all these things, and they just force fed that into my mind, that I was greater than what my dad was telling me I was, my stepdad. And so I created this wall against my stepdad, and everything he said to me I didn't believe was true, because I believed my coaches over him. And so I would say probably around 9, I was already developing my own mindset about who I was, what I was, how I was going to be successful in the world, and I knew that it was and I never stopped. I stayed the same ever since then. But I always felt like I had insights into things that were unique, and and I really loved sports. To me, sports to me was my way of finding myself.
Thank goodness that you were environments that you had that attainable, because unfortunately, not every kid in a dysfunctional, which most are in, by the way, doesn't matter your socioeconomics, doesn't matter
Yeah,
what parents or elders you're around. Everybody has dysfunction, like everybody has an addiction, like everybody has things, and people who hear this might be like, who the are you to say such things? Well, the truth is that's the truth.
yeah, it is the
To
truth.
what degree or to not what degree is it dysfunctional in the way that it disrupts everybody's life and well-being? No, it doesn't have to be that.
Yeah,
It could be self-inflicted, but somehow it trickles out, as we both know. To some, it can be more disruptive in a bigger framework, like you're referring to. But we all come from different levels of this stuff, which is why I always say we're a living sculpture. We're always having to address things. It's the choice of whether or not you want to or not. So it is really great that you, as a kid, had these environments with these positive influences outside your realm of your home that saved you and woke you up and helped you make a decision at that moment. And when people say, "Oh, kids don't know anything," that's bullshit.
no,
Because
I
kids
mean,
do know.
yeah,
Kids know. They're just little formulas of bigger versions of
yeah,
just having more time around.
yeah,
And
yeah.
we don't give them enough credit and enough of a voice. And that's why I asked how old you were, that you remembered making those decisions, because I think it's really important to teach people that we need to pay greater attention to all stages of life And the under 10-year-old stage is a really important because I think I said to Rachel yesterday that any child 5 or under is still in what I refer to as this very pure state.
Mhm.
Like, they haven't really fully submerged in this planet called Earth and
Right.
us,
Yeah,
and they're in this, like, transformative, like, in the galaxy kind of mentality of,
yeah.
"We're here, but we're entering. We're still over here, but we're entering." So it's like their soul can remember past lives. So they may randomly say under the age of 5, as they're walking through San Juan, Puerto Rico, but they're from Seattle. This truly happened, like, with my eldest niece, and this
Really?
kind of stuff happens all the time. Turns to my sister and then brother-in-law and turns and says, "I was an artist here once."
Really? Wow,
4 years old. 4
that's
years old.
neat, really, that's yeah, I haven't heard of that, but, I think I might have heard a story in Sri Lanka because they do believe in life after death there, and I remember I forgot what book it was in, I'm trying to remember it, but it was some guy talking about, life after death, and there was a story about this boy that had drowned in a creek in this town, and then they had a funeral and all that, and he was gone, and then there was a boy like an hour away in another town that was born, and
Yeah,
he was around three, maybe around 4 at the time, 3 or 4 years old, and they were driving. They were just driving through the country, and they went by the creek, and the boy said, "My sister pushed me in the water right there, and I didn't come up," like that, and they were like, "What?"
mhm,
Because uh, it was 6 months that had passed from that.
mhm,
Not
mhm.
6 months.
4 years.
4 years. Excuse me, 4 years.
Yeah,
But there was, but it was like 4.5 years. So there was
yeah,
a 6 month gap from the death to his birth,
yeah.
and so where was he at 6 months, right? But they immediately investigated it, and from what I remember, that family that lost that child ended up, that other family gave them their child, and
Wow.
so that child ended up being raised by his original family. It was really interesting. It was an interesting
Yeah,
story.
that's interesting that they referred to that family as the original family.
Yeah,
I don't know, it's not for me to say whether I agree with that or not. I do believe, and I know this is a very religious kind of, like, entering into potential dipping of things that most people don't dip, but I do believe that our souls do reincarnate. I do believe that our bodies are one thing, our souls are another thing. Our souls, again, like the dog, like the conversation about dogs. It's not that we're not attached. I think we have a lot more attachment. Clearly, we do because that's why we have so many issues around body imagery, dysmorphia, all the things
it's
attached.
the attachment's the cause of all angst.
All angst, all angst.
Yeah,
That's a whole nother conversation that we'll
yeah,
probably get into. But with that said, yes, I do believe that we do go through many iterations. Our souls, I mean, I would imagine my soul's been around for thousands and thousands of years. And unless you're such a new spirit that you're just landing here from some other, I don't know what. And I'm not an alien thinker, but I am a soul believer that our souls reincarnate. I do believe that we know when we've had those moments, like that little boy said. I
yeah.
do believe, I mean, I certainly know I have feelings. I certainly know so certain relationships or certain places geographically. And I think if most people were willing to, like, get past their limited beliefs, they would have more awareness and realizations into those visions or moments of probably messages being shared to them, and why maybe they repeat things that they do, or why they're drawn to things that they are, or why they have the belief systems that they do, because it tends to thread. It tends to kind of carry forward, I mean, if I could go deeper, but this is part of like the kinds of things that I don't discuss a lot. And interesting, going back to like the veterinarian medicine and how we raise dogs and cats and all that. So if you spoke on like raising dogs, like we said early on in the 60s, 70s, early 80s, like having them in your bed, living this life and giving them all this protection and traveling and making sure you book the hotel with them, not without them. All the things people would like look at you sideways. Well, it's the same thing with like mind expansion when it comes to visualization and affirmations and mindsets of the ability to like see beyond what we think we see.
Yeah. Well,
Today, as we enter into this Aquarian stage of life,
yeah.
the
Yeah.
woo woo wah wah, la la lulu, whatever you refer to, the witchy poo, whatever,
Right.
is more in the mindset of I want to lean in and listen.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. It's interesting about that because, the two biggest problems I think people face is reconciling time and consciousness. And the two of them are, I think, the two main issues that form the well, basically, I think they form health, the your perspective on health. They impact your perspective on health the most. So you have, time, which is obviously um, quite, just talking about time itself is really interesting because we have, the present time, we have the future, we have the past, and we have this impending mortality, right? And we have to look at things and say, we have this limited amount of time. How do we want to spend our time? What do we want to do with our time? All this kind of stuff, and how important is our time? And then we have the other issue with time is that it's connected to our survival reflexes. So naturally, our instincts are tied to time. And so anything that threatens our existence is threatening our time. And so therefore, if there's a threat, it triggers survival reflexes, fight or flight responses that impact our thinking, impact our homeostasis, impact our health. Well, the same thing can be said about consciousness too. So not only does time present a lot of issues for people to reconcile with, but so does consciousness, because consciousness, according to Antonio Damasio, who's probably the leading neuroscientist in this subject, consciousness is our feeling state. It is, our ability to recognize we are alive. So you've got your consciousness in three levels: your musculoskeletal system, your internal milieu, right? All your organs, your systems, and then you have, you know, um, with all that, you have your five senses, and so your five senses can only go so far. And so people talk about this sixth sense, which is an expansion of consciousness. There's no real proof that exists. There's as far as like current science, but they're working on it. They're trying to figure it out, and so there's basically a doorway from which science goes right up to the door, and it's the limit of our perspectives. It's the limit of our five senses. It's the limit of everything that we know about how it's the farthest we can extend ourselves out into our consciousness before it starts to go into the metaphysical, right? And the
Correct.
metaphysical is that of which cannot be defined. And so that's where I just say, well, you know what? Anything is possible because I don't know. Nobody knows. So that's where faith comes in. And so you have faith. You can, believe whatever you want to believe. You can think that there's fairy tales at the end of the rainbow. You can think that there's, this or that. It's like anything and everything exists in the metaphysical realm, because it's nearly impossible to prove, at least at this point. But, I think that the problems that people are faced with is that they no longer look at the consciousness that they have as a gateway to having a great life. They look they get caught up in the role playing in society,
The
and
minutia.
reduce their lives down into this role that they play, and it's like, no, you are way more magical than that, man. You are a space being on a rock, flying in an infinite universe, and maybe even multiple universes for all we know. And
Totally.
and so there's you know unlimited possibilities out there of what could be and what can be, and all. So it's just it's hard to get people out of their matrix. That, and the matrix is, I always say, there's two layers of the matrix now. There used to just be one, but there's another layer. But the first layer is just your head, getting out of your head and getting into your body and your spirit, and and getting into connection with nature, and your higher consciousness, right? And really looking at yourself through this magical lens. And then there's this, well, I'm just Jake, I'm a health coach who's like, doing this, doing that, and you start to identify yourself as that. And then, I have this going on, I got that going on, I got, I mean, my life is crap here, it's good here, and it's just this game of comparing and analyzing and trying to figure out. And you're just living in this dualistic world where it's hot and cold, it's good and bad, it's good and evil. It's like all these things are just, all these binary duality sort of mindsets that we have about, survival, safety, security, and risk and reward, and pain and pleasure, and everything is just based on those spectrums. And so, I just feel like we have to try to tap into that sixth sense. We have to expand our consciousness. We need to explore. We need to try to get into those deeper realms of existence, so that we're not in this suffering place that I feel like everyone is in, just because they're stressed out about work, and stressed out about relationships, and stressed out about this, and stressed out about that. And so, having this conversation with you is really, I think, the most amazing part of this conversation is the bravery that you have in what you're faced with, and what you've been going through, that the battling of cancer, and how you were not going to let this get you, like you are going to fight the way you would fight, even if you didn't have cancer. You'd still be working hard and doing the right, doing everything you can, and so, tell me, if you can, like, where did all of this bravery come from? Because I think this is something a lot of people, I feel, are not well equipped to deal with.
Well, it's interesting because didn't um I think that this is a thread that goes back to childhood stuff. A lot of, not a similarity, but a lot of things that taught me a lot of the abilities to ebb and flow, bob and weave, and like when you just were talking about the battling of cancer and where that bravery came from. Um, I mean, at one point I was even training with pro boxers, And the boxers, the men around me, I was the only woman. The men around me would be like, I don't want to be in the ring with you because you look mean. And I'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, have you seen my baby picture? Like, I have the sweetest little face on. They're like, yeah, but when you're focused, you look mean. Like, you are so focused.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I know that I've had that kind of a focus ever since I was a really little girl. Like, I was always really clear, like, how to achieve. I was really clear how to, like, make things happen. Not because I had the answers, but I was just my intentions. And I think that that's why things would bother me if it wasn't in the picture of what I imagined. So, I grew up as a kid, unfortunately, and also a dysfunctional household. It started out basically as like two very mixed cultures and religions coming together at a time that wasn't kosher. And that created a lot of upset and a lot of passion and upheaval, including physical and emotional abuse between my parents that I don't remember witnessing at the age of 3, but I know I was, because then I started making personal decisions like in the middle of the night. I can't save my parents, but I can nurture the little soul Felicia. So I beeline into the kitchen and climb up into the cupboards and start feeding myself to like soothe my soul. I always had a very nurturing sensibility. I was always a really smart little girl. I had a sense of all the things around me. I was very, very heightened awareness to all things from great conversations and intelligence to beauty, and development and design. And I was raised around the fashion business and the real estate business and politics and in very many social scenes, publicly and privately. So I was like a little girl in a big person soul. And there had just been many life moments where bravery was part of you had to show up and be. Um, I always tell, not always tell, but a very foundational aspect of my life was when my parents finally decided to divorce. I was 14, my sister was 11, my brother was 19. My parents have been together over 20 years. Got divorced. I was in the middle of the Appalachians at 14, climbing the Appalachian Mountains in Georgia. Like, what kid was doing that back in the mid 70s? None of my friends were doing that. My best friend was doing that with me. And we were with a group from the Y, like, whose parents let their kid travel from like Northern Illinois to Georgia with two guys in a van with a group of kids your age, like randomly. My parents clearly were not present because they were in their own shit,
Yeah.
but they were loving people who really did try to provide us really great exposure to things. And they did culturally, live theater, art, politics, all the things. And it developed me in a way that shaped me to be aware of, like, again, all my things. And when my parents divorced, and then my father lost all of our family businesses, which were 3 generations, and my father died 5 months a day, it shaped me. It shaped me in a way that in 5 months, we literally lost everything. And shockingly, my father had our house attached to a small business loan. Ironically, he heard a lot about SBAs during the pandemic. I haven't heard about SBAs that much since I was a little kid. I wouldn't have touched an SBA if you could have paid me enough because my association with SBAs is my childhood. And our house was attached to an SBA loan, and my father died with no life insurance. And my mom was a public school teacher, and she was all of 42. That really foundationally shaped me. I went from being like the class president and a first cellist and a national awarding artist and a really smart girl. But the thing that always hung over me, and I was always made to feel not complete or of value or that I could have it, was that I always had extra weight on my body. Well, gee, I wonder why. I was in protection mode. I couldn't protect myself or others from all the other shit. So how can I be of protection mode? Well, I'll protect me from any, which inevitably still hurt because of all of the stuff that came at you from all the outside sources. If I had never been integrated with outside sourcing, I would never have known that there was something wrong with me and how I had to show up with a face and a confidence and a I've got this when I never felt like I had it. But I was always challenging myself to just show up and be my best version of myself, not in competition with Susie or Lisa or Mark and whomever. No, just with me. Like it was my job to like be the best of the best. I wasn't gonna trample over anybody to do it. I wasn't gonna be manipulative. I was just gonna own it. And so I've always had that tenacity, that fire in me, that little Leo in me, even though I'm a Virgo, but I have a lot of Leos. So there's like, I'm a hard worker, but I'm like, I'm supposed to shine, right? I'm supposed to shine, but, but not in a manipulative way, in a really heartwarming, courageous way. I'm an
Yeah.
inspirational way. So I think that foundation and that like cookie cutter imprint kind of came in with my soul. I think I've always fought for the underdog. I think I've always fought for fairness. You know, if we talk about souls coming from other places, I have had experiences where I've seen my soul like come up through other times of the world. And didn't think consciously that way as a kid. It didn't really come to me until later. And coming forward, I have gone through some very major life things that if they don't teach you how to keep getting up, I don't know what is. And that includes domestic violence. And that includes, I've been through cancer before, 4 times with papillary thyroid cancer. And as they say, when you get a cancer, if you're going to get a cancer, that's a cancer you want to get because you're not going to die from the cancer. Woohoo. Like, what? You know, like, okay, great. Well, that was never on my brain and in my realm. It was just a matter of what do I need to do? So come forward to what you speak on. I was diagnosed last November 2022 with early stage 3 ovarian cancer. And thank God, because I come from a pre-med background as well as a fine art background, and I've been in Hollywood for, well, in Hollywood since 92, but I started in the entertainment business in the 80s in Chicago. I've always been very science minded. I've always been about speaking up. I've always been about teaching and inspiring and like asking questions because I'm curious by nature. And I will speak up when something doesn't feel right, but not in a ratty sort of way or disruptive way. Like in my personal situation, I was experiencing something that I knew wasn't normal. So, ironically, to take you back with our relationship and things so people know like a little bit about like how Jake and Felicia and your partner Rachel and I connected 3 years ago when the pandemic hit. I started to go online when I couldn't be online. If I was on a film set taking care of number one, I was doing expanding businesses with athleisure brands and things like that. That's how Rachel and I connected. We made a running joke. Oh, we should have a pod. This is too bad this isn't a podcast conversation. And I said, if I only knew how to plug it in. A year later, I launched my podcast, which was October 21.
That's
And
it's Camp Fifi Uncensored.
correct, Can't Be Uncensored. And a month in, you guys agreed to be a part of my guest lineup,
Yep.
which was amazing because it was such a welcoming, trusting, like, of course we want to be a part of this. Of course we want to support you. And, you know, I've been really, really fortunate to have some really extraordinary experiences in my life as amongst the dysfunction and the heartache. I've had some extraordinary education. I've been a part of extraordinary communities. I've been around extraordinary things that have formed me in ways that I've in turn been able to help form others and that I take very passionately and seriously. And I pride myself on being a leader. I pride myself on being an expansive thinker. I pride myself on being a person who, because of all the things that I've witnessed, that I'm the safe place to come to, that I'm the person that anybody can talk to me about anything, and I will never sit in judgment. I may ask you a slew of questions, but I'm not going to judge you. I'm going to talk with you. I'm going to listen to you. We're going to pull back the onion, and we're going to sew things up, and we're going to love on you, and we're going to love on it. And we're going to figure out a way, and we're going to like take that clay, and by the time we're done, it's going to feel like maybe we sat down and had a really great gelato along with like some life points and purposes, and we go out into the world and hopefully powerfully shift and do things that is much greater. And
Yeah.
that all comes from, again, my interactions with people, my building blocks, the shoulders I stand on, and the shoulders hopefully that I'm I'm providing for others. And so this last few years, I've gone through some shifts, merely personal, that were more transactional in front of people, including a year ago, I ended up tearing my meniscus out of nowhere, which many people do because the knees are the most used part of the body, that half the time you never know how these things happen. And that was my case. And I'm a hiker, and I'm a person who still wants to travel the world. And I know, watching aging people and things like dogs and things that, all of a sudden use very active soul, no longer can do the things. I said to myself, Jesus God, there is no way in hell you're going to stop me from moving in my body. I have the world to still see 10 times over. I have a very physical career. I am a very physical person. I do not want to be limited in my body. And I made a decision to heal myself naturally versus go to the orthopedic surgeon. And I put myself in the water, and I started doing therapy. And a month in, I ended up having this voice go off inside of me that said, "Hey, Felice, you got to lose weight. You got to get weight off your joints. Like, it's not just about physical therapy, it's about what you're carrying around." So this time last year, I made a decision to drop weight. Now, by the way, just to give your audience a little framework, it was months after you and I had sat down, you and Rachel and I had sat down. And then I think maybe Rachel and I, or you and I don't remember, had sat down one more time. But when I first sat down with you guys, I was almost 200 pounds. And by the time that March came around, that's, the weight, the realm I was in, and I needed to shift things. And by August of last year, September, I had shifted by dropping up to 53 pounds with my goal to lose about 70, 75 pounds. And after so many moments of us getting together on my podcast saying, well, why aren't I not working with you guys? Why aren't I like enough already? And that's when Rachel and I started working out together and doing our stuff, and our relationship started developing. And it was November, after months from that August to November, that something was going on inside of me that I knew wasn't right. And this is part of the bravery, is my willingness to talk about something. That bravery was, I started saying to doctors, this isn't normal. And they would say to me, oh, that's just what women go through. And I'd be like, how dare you say what you're saying to me based upon what I'm about to reveal? So what was happening to me was I wasn't incontinent, and I wasn't having a sense of urinary urgency or any of those things. And as I put it scientifically or medically speaking, my vagina or my vaginal area was tight, and my muscles were tight, and nothing was like coming out because I couldn't control it. But yet something was. And I say this very vulnerably because this could save a lot of women's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what's amazing to me is that you would tell this to the doctor, but the doctor would dismiss it, would marginalize your concern. That's what
Well, women are marginalized every day, Jake, every minute. and I'm not being negative, women are marginalized. Women, it's a tough thing to share publicly, but women are marginalized all the time in all aspects of their life.
Yeah.
From the painters you hire to come to your home, to the gas station attendant, to the teacher, the coach, whatever. Women go through this all the time, which is why women like me have to gently, passionately, in our own lioness ways, speak up on behalf of all of you, all of the ones that we love, men and women. Because it's not a man against women thing. It's just women are never, ever, always heard and taken seriously. And for that reason, why you see pharmacy aisles lined with adult diapers and pads and all the things that women just go to the pharmacy and get yourself a box of pads. I'm sorry, excuse me. I'm not going to fucking live with a bunch of pads the rest of my life because have you not seen me? I'm going through cancer and this is what I look like going through cancer.
It's just
Yes, if I
absurd to
take,
me.
well, exactly. And so I did not stop.
Good for you.
Fortunately, a month after this started showing up and I started asking questions, then I started to see blood. And I kept saying, this is not normal. This is not okay. I have a pre-med background. I know better. And by the way, just to give you a little bit more science about me, again, to give perspective, I did go through thyroid cancer between the years of 2011 and 2016. And iodine radiation between my first and second surgery to supposedly eradicate it, which, what it eradicated was me getting my period every month. And I didn't know it. And I mourned not getting my period because I still wanted, and we still wanted to have children naturally. And that felt taken away from me. I mourned that more than going through cancer. And it was really like, so for me personally, when I started seeing blood in this current time, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I've not bled since February 2012. So this is definitely in 2022 of November, not okay. This
Right.
is not normal. I'm saying this is not normal. What I was told, oh, well, this is what women go through. Your inner walls are probably thinning. This is due to maturation. I was like, fuck you. Do you talk to men about their penises this way? Like, no, you don't. You do not bring up men's penises about, listen, man, your maturation. This is why you're leaking. This is why you can't get it up. This
Right.
is why that you just don't talk to men this way. You don't push them off in the same way. Men are also too goddamn embarrassed because they're not given safe environments to have really honest, open conversations. And if I had gone through with becoming a doctor and why I am an intuitive healer, is because I want to give space to people to have open conversations so we can help solve these problems in a much more organic, safe environment, to lead them to the right experts, to get them to the resolve so they can save their lives. That's who I am channeling and being. I'm completely aware of my willing to come into my powers, so to speak, without sounding egotistical. These are my strengths. People have always sought me out for who would you go to. They probably don't even know why half the time. Half the time I would even question why are they coming to me? And then I'd be like, because I'm going to get them the best of the best. But there's more to it than that. It's more soulful than that. And so in my situation, what ended up happening was my gynecologist I've been with for years, who is a very smart human being, but instead of us going directly, I mean, we did do imaging and we did see a cyst, but oh, we'll watch this, but it wasn't anything crazy. Let's do this thing called a Mona Lisa. Well, Mona Lisa, for those who don't know, is where a woman is lasered inside of her vaginal walls to stimulate the walls, to activate the collagen and thicken the walls. And I'm going to take it to a little bit rawer place. What I call the French doctor who said the 50, 60, 70-year-old French who want to fuck the 20-year-old, 30-year-old, excuse me, pussy, you know, have to make sure that the walls are thick enough so their penis is stimulated. I wanted to say, Bapangu. That's what I want to say.
Right.
Because forgive me, but there's plenty of 50, 60, and 70-year-old women's vaginas that are perfectly great and fine just as they are.
Right.
And you wouldn't say to the man, hey, with that penis, why don't you go get a little work done and thicken up your collagen so I can feel that shit in my vagina? Like, women
Right.
are much more kind and caring than that. Am I
Right.
making
Right.
sense?
Yeah. No,
Okay.
it sounds so, it just sounds so bizarre to me, because you know, I really, I mean, I've heard a lot of stories about experiences, not like this, but experiences of people going to the doctor and just having things like this all being said. I'm like, I just don't understand the logic behind a lot of this, you know, because what's the harm of just checking you out and making sure that you're 100% okay? Like,
Right.
where's the harm in that?
Well, there was money to be made for one thing, because that was a cosmetic thing that took place over several sessions over a couple months. And it was a 50-50 chance of it working. And I did it hoping it would work. That because there was no way my brain, as much as my brain can travel, I never once went to I've got cancer. I never once went to I'm something more is going on here. I never went into fear mode or any of that kind of
Yeah.
thing. I was assertive, I was advocating, I was talking about it. I wasn't staying quiet about it, just going off and quietly purchasing my pads, you know, there I was clear that something wasn't right. Once that third session happened and nothing had changed, I was like, God damn it, get me imaging now. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, because my gynecologist was out in my network and my internist, who I was trying to get through my network to make sure that my imaging didn't cost me an arm and a leg, I asked him to communicate. And that was a whole nother mishgash of taking several weeks to the point where I just was like, I mean, honestly, who the hell are you people? Like, all you do is sit in an office with computers and phones. All you have to do is write up an email, make a phone call. I'm an octopus out in the world managing 20 different things. And weeks have gone by, again, putting my foot down, finally being in my office of the internist, who, by the way, the year before the pandemic hit, had asked me to go back to medical school. I thought he was kidding me to go back to medical school. He's like, we need doctors like you. And I was like, I don't know if you're kidding me right now, if I'm supposed to be complimenting. He said, no, I'm completely serious. And I said, well, I really am complimented. He said, I said, but I'm not willing to put my family in debt for $200,000 when I can't work and do all the things and not even know if that's like the way I want to go through the world. But
Right.
I was touched by it. And here I am in this man's office saying, you know, get me this shit now. And I thankfully was in with an MRI the very next morning, which was a week before Thanksgiving. And I was now hours later on a film set in the middle of a parking lot when I get a call from him, knowing that that was not a normal thing to receive a call from him in the middle of work, letting me know that the radiologist had seen the MRI and said, your patient needs to get to an oncologist right away. She, I believe, has ovarian cancer. And after 4 months of my going through all this asking, saying, speaking up, I got so mad. I didn't know who I wanted to take out first. It was just line them up. I'll take them all down.
Yeah,
I
because
wanted
you
to
could have
kick
caught
some ass.
you could have caught it 4 months earlier.
Right. Correct. So for me, going back to your bravery statement, for me, it's like if you knew how many women aren't heard and how many women are told, well, this is just what women go through, and how they are just misdiagnosed left and right, left and right, left and right, and how women's funding and research in the healthcare world is the lowest thing on the totem pole when it comes to money and research. Yeah, that's the truth, and it's been the truth. I mean, I wasn't pre-med. I was pre-med in the '80s, and it's the truth is still the truth. It's still the same scenario. And when I immediately said to my internist, you need to get me the best gynecological oncologist stat. You need to get me all this blood work up stat. You need to get me like and I knew that I had to do the footwork, but I needed the information. And I let a few people know how upset I was in certain offices. And I let it be known that if this is the information I'm getting and this is how I've been led, I can only imagine how many other women's lives have been put at risk. And shame on you. I mean, I just did not hold back. I lashed, and I lashed in a way that was I had no regrets for, because I knew that I needed to speak up for lots of women at that moment, whether they ever knew that I did or didn't. If I never knew their names or whoever, whatever, it was like a wake up call to people that I was holding them accountable, and that they could never, ever, once again with me, let alone they better wake up in their systems and their practices, because they signed they signed a morality, ethical license to do what they're doing. And at the end of the day, this is what I say, and I believe in doctors and I believe in science. But at the end of the day, doctors are students of science, they are not gods. And
Yeah.
people need to realize that you need to marry these people, you need to be an advocate, you need to ask questions, you need to I didn't say become a Google doctor, because Google doctoring is not the answer either. I'm saying in your body when things are right and not right. When if you're leaking and you don't feel yourself leaking, and yet you've got all the nerve endings working down there, and yet the shit's still happening. That's not right. And are you going to make a decision at 60 to live with that until 100? Fuck no. Excuse my swearing, but no. No, I'm not going to live that way the next 40 years. There's something not right here. No, that's not the way I'm living. No, I'm not going to live with having to wear pads the rest of my life. No, that's not my reality, because I'm a healthy woman. No, I'm more healthy now than, possibly at 18 or 28 or 38. Like, I'm turning back the clock, and that's what I was doing. That's why when that showed up, I was like, whoa, 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 no, no, no. We took a wrong turn here. Let's get back to square one.
Yeah.
Now, the interesting and great thing is I ended up with like one of the finest gynecological oncologists one could get their hands on. I've got an extraordinary medical team. They showed up the way I insisted. They knew who they were dealing with. They even said to me, first off, by the mere fact that I lost the weight, and I've never met these people before, but they were aware because they were paying attention to my charts. First thing out of this oncologist's mouth was, after introducing himself to my husband and me, was, I understand you haven't been heard. And I'm here to hear you, and I'm here to cure you.
Nice.
And
So,
for me, go ahead.
um, I took a note here.
Yeah.
And I think the lesson I took here was like, don't let someone else tell you what your value is. When you know what your value is, like you got to stand up for your value,
On
because
anything,
yeah,
on anything. Like if you've got your intuition is your intuition,
that's right. Yeah, so
you know?
your life is valuable, but a lot of people don't understand is that these doctors are seeing you in a couple of minutes. They're bound by medical boards. They're influenced by pharmaceutical companies. They're looking for the most logical explanation for things, which sometimes need a much more deeper analysis, like especially in your
You're
case,
right.
right?
You're
And that,
right.
and that it's important for you to not just allow that system to dictate to you your value. That, like, if you feel like you need more, you feel like you're not satisfied, you feel like you want to make sure that you have uncovered everything, and everything's out on a table for you to look at, you gotta ask for more. You gotta push, and you gotta push, and you gotta push.
And a lot of
Because you,
people don't know how to push, and I
that's
don't
right.
mean push in a way that people don't want to work with you. I mean in a way that, I heard somebody today say, well, it's really difficult to get appointments. Okay, that's a mindset. So maybe that is a fact, but how are you going to work through that?
Yeah, like
That's
don't
what
let
I
that
ask
stop
people
you.
all
Like
the
that
time.
means just work twice as hard to try to get an appointment.
Than losing weight. We all know it's not going to be easy to lose weight. We all know it's not easy to work out. We all know that it's not easy to, always roll out of bed and go to work. We all know that it's not easy to like have to shit. Now I gotta go grocery shop, or I gotta go fill the tank up so I can get from A to B. These are all our jobs. These are all our responsibilities. It's a choice. You made a decision at 9 what you didn't like and what you did like and what you wanted to create for your life to make that happen. I made decisions at a very young age of a kind of life I wanted to have. And no matter how many tests that I've been given, even as recent as this one, then I'm still going to be who I'm here to be, which is a powerful impact, successful, philanthropic, you know, affecting people all around the world in ways that people will speak about me when I'm long gone, because my stuff will still be resonating with lots and lots of people. And I made those decisions by the time I was 18, after collectively I had seen already enough in my life. And now I've just been marinating through the rest of these collections of things that have been formulating to help enlighten me and be able to talk about things I can talk about in a wide variety of things I can talk about, culminated with all the things that I learned as a little girl, watching generations before me come up, through all the things that they come up and how I learned from them. So I walk like with lots of generations of information, as well as my own that I formulated. And yeah, when it comes to your own health and wealth, um, you know, we all have a decision to make. And listen, I get that maybe not everybody who's listening to this may or may not have medical insurance currently. I don't know, because I know that that's something I have to work hard to keep and have. And I know that I'm fortunate to have it, and therefore I'm fortunate to be able to get the kind of care I want. But I have to speak up and I have to ask for it. But I also have to show up and work in order to have it. So there's a lot of elements that have gone into play for all the things, the road to have been laid out in a way that I can do this journey that's um, of health and wellness and mental health and wellness and recovery and healing in a manner that has that I have laid years and years and years before me to be in this position to do this. And I don't take that lightly. And I take that with like thank God moments, because I've had to learn a lot of life lessons even doing this, like putting myself first, walking away from big projects that I was like asking for and the kind of people I wanted to be working with, and walk away from that to put myself first. Because once I had a very successful surgery, thank goodness, and they were able to get it all out, and I was one of the lucky ones, because sadly ovarian cancer for many women is a death sentence, and it's too far along by the time that they go in to save a lot of lives. And so I'm a person who right now sits before you that I have 2 more chemo treatments out of 6. And my goal is that they share with me, that I hear the words that I'm cured. And I believe I am, and I'm living my life that way, not radically in the sense of, like where I'm taking good care of myself, and that it starts with my mindset. And so my bravery comes from my mindset. I put out a post today about letting go of fear. And when you hear that you've been diagnosed with ovarian cancer, you can't tell me anything scarier than that. And
No,
I've been almost
that
at the death
that
hands of domestic violence. Like, you can't
that's like
scare me anymore.
that's so scary. And so tell me what you did, what happened to you when you got that diagnosis? Like what changes did you make in your in just from where you were before the diagnosis to when you got the diagnosis? What changes, if any, did you make in your approach to getting healthier and getting through this, both physically, spiritually, and mentally?
I would say, first off, I was really, really fortunate because I was already so aligned with being in a healthy mindset. And I'm so grateful for that. And that stems all going back to a year ago, literally a year ago, yesterday, funny enough, that, you know, I made a decision to get weight off of me. And again, my oncologist, one of the first things he said to me after this pelvic exam he did on me was he was literally standing over me and said, "I see that you've dropped over 50 pounds." And I said, "Yes." And he said, "You have no idea like how not only impressive that is, but what an asset that is to your health and well-being." And I truly believe in that moment, what I also had a realization of was this man knows exactly how committed I am. He knows how much I show up for myself because of the actions I took. And it's charted, even though that was not discussed. All they have to do is see what I weighed from one doctor to another. It's all in the system. And therefore, he's going to show up committed because he knows that he's dealing with somebody whose intentions are to be the
Right.
best, to show up being the best, to take good care of oneself, all the things. And when that diagnosis came, and what decisions did I make that were different or the same? Well, the good news was my mindset was already there. I just knew at that point it was all about amping things up, which was amping up all the best foods that I could get in my system, the moving my body, the staying in a positive mindset, surrounding myself with positive communities, getting rid of anything and anyone who was toxic, that was lingering and left
That's a good
over.
one.
No room for that. Kick that shit to the curb. Like there is no time for it. And I've done it. I've done it in ways that people may or may not even know.
Yeah.
I just don't want to interact with them anymore. I've come really close to blocking people. People I've known for a long time
Yeah.
that I know in my soul, just I have nothing to interact. I don't care how close we were.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
They showed
like you
me.
said,
They showed me.
it's life and death. Uh, and we don't know what you're going through. If you haven't gone through it, you wouldn't know what you're going through. And when you look at what you have, the resources you have to go, okay, I need the best chance of survival. Like I need to go do this the best way I know how. And there's no room for error in that, you know.
No,
So it's like and you have to always err on the side of caution. And so yeah, if you have someone that's causing you any sort of angst or pain or any negativity or any toxicity, it's like nope, sorry, out. It's like there's just no buffer. You can't rely on that buffer any longer.
no, definitely not. And perfect example is the last treatment I had. So my husband normally takes me and he was doing the Oscars that week and he would have taken me. And I said, no, 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 I don't want to interrupt what you're doing. My brother thankfully came in and took care of me and took me to treatment. And, let's face it, hopefully most of us never have to walk into a hospital wing where a bunch of people are in these cubicles receiving chemo treatment. It's not even with all my experiences in life, that was something, and even working with cancer patients, that I had never been around, and certainly wasn't looking to be a part of. And um, it's funny, as you go one treatment after another, the more things that you pick up on in your surroundings, the more awareness you are as, time evolves. And like, I film scenes like this, but I've never been in it in my own personal life. And so I've been really fortunate, knock wood, that every treatment I've received has been in a private space versus out in a cubicle, out in the main floor of how they've designed these
Mhm.
setups. And that in of itself has been just a grace of, like, being watched over, because it is a very private experience for me, as open, as public and transparent as I can be, to hopefully help awaken and to teach advocating and the importance of selflessly sharing, because you never know who may need to hear this story, and
Mhm.
who can save somebody else's life in the process. In the last treatment that I was at with my brother, where we were placed was the only room that has had windows. And in the windows looking out, ironically for me, in the distance was the Hollywood sign. And off behind it at the time, because of the weather, were these gorgeous radiating snow-capped mountains. And I remember, as I wrote about it later, that the Hollywood sign, and it's not about the Hollywood sign itself, it's the history of me with the Hollywood sign and the snow-capped mountains, that were like my oxygen and lifeline that day, and what I focused on to get through chemo. And to start with, I disdain needles. Like, I like 24 hours or more before I have to really start, like, getting out of my mind about how much I don't want to go through the process of being stabbed with needles. And I do acupuncture all the time. So I'm not like, I can't do needles. I just, it really just it's just like, if you can't get it right the first time, I'm like breathing heavily. I'm going through all these things. My eyes are closed. Like, I'm not very good at it. And so it takes a lot, and I'm sure whomever's with me, it's also not comfortable, and I'm sure the person trying to put the needle in, no matter how good they are, it's not comfortable, because the you can tell I'm not a relaxed. I'm great after it, but I'm not at the moment. And one of the things I wrote about in regards to that moment, and it was so good because I wasn't the first needle that attempted to go in, didn't go in well. And I said, please, please, let's, and the person, even, I didn't even have to say anything. I'm sure she knew. She's like, I'm going to go get like so and so, and we'll make this happen. Who did, by the way. But I wrote about how in 1992, when I moved to LA, I had a loft space, and I had a two-tiered outdoor deck. And I could literally go out there, and it was private. Like, the only people that could see me were literally the helicopters flying over me.
Mm.
I could literally go out there in the nude and do yoga or calisthenics. Like, that's how private it was. And it was literally my Zen den, where I would just roll out of bed and go out there and do my stuff. But what I'd also do every morning was my affirmation. And I'd look up at the Hollywood sign and I'd say, "Good morning, Hollywood. I'm going to take you by your balls today."
Nice.
So I literally felt like, through this whole cancer thing, I made this mantra of that, I'm kicking in the ass with love, and I'm winning.
Nice.
And I don't have to do it with anger. I don't have to do it with, how dare they had wasted time. I don't have to do it with any of that. That's like not my interest. My interest is I'm cured. My interest is that I've been able to open up and inspire. The interest is in that it's given me a space to be creative and to figure things out. It's allowed me to, you know, have another reason for my voice needing to be heard, and that it's part of who I am and my truth, or very much a part of who I am and my truth, or one of the many layers of my truth. And that um, if this is bravery to somebody else, then attach whatever you need to attach yourself to give yourself that ability to forge ahead. And I always say, and I learned this going through thyroid cancer, because you know, you think you're going to go through it. If you're going to go through any of that shit, okay, one and done. Little did I know I'd have to go through it 3 more times. And I don't even have cancer in history in my family. So it's all like very, very foreign to all of us. And I remember making the decision on my second surgery when my doctor said, after I just kept going with work and work and work, that I couldn't work for a couple months. And I remember thinking, oh my God, like, you know, nobody tells me I can't do work or do my thing and whatever. And I remember thinking back then, like, all these vehicles opened up for me, like creative stuff that I wanted to do and all these things. But the ultimate thing that I did that I didn't tell anybody was, and I'm not even into superheroes, but that I was walking around with an invisible superhero cape on, and I was going to be impenetrable, that I was going to rise above it all, that I was going to soar above all of it, that I was going to, because I have lots and lots of impact still to be here making. And I do believe that. I do believe for myself personally that all these years of all these life experiences that I've been through, that many people said I should write books about, which led me to, you know, launching my podcast, and maybe eventually someday we'll put pen to paper, as I do love to write, as many people get to see it on a social platform, that, you know, I do believe I've been marinating through all this stuff to be a bigger, you know, have a bigger voice. And I've had some pretty crazy moments of people telling me that. And owning my power has been one of my biggest challenges for me personally, to be brave and to step into. And I think that I'm finally arriving. And I think that I'm finally ready to accept that I'm here for a much bigger reason, and that it's okay to be me, and it's okay to be my power, and it's okay to shine my light, because I'm not shining my light selfishly. I'm shining my light selflessly, so that many others can be guided and inspired and hopefully entertained as well as educated. Hopefully they're laughing through what they're learning and crying, you know, tears of, oh my God, I can't believe she just had the balls enough to say that shit. And that I take down that fourth, fifth, sixth wall, whatever it is that is limiting people in their belief systems, to let them know that, you know, we all matter. It's not division, divisive. It's not, you know, whether we're living with diversity or inclusivity. Man, I know discrimination from the time I was, you know, entered the like sperm and egg collaboration. Like, I came up through all that shit. There's no time for any of it. There's no time for violence. There's no time for, you know, putting people down. There's no time. Like, we only have so much time, as we started talking about, right? We only have so much.
Right.
So are we here to like enjoy and eat the cake, so to speak, together in a really like memorable way? Are we here to like destroy? Like, why even be here? Like, what are we doing? So I think, in the sense of my mindset, my bravery, what did I do and what did I shift when I got the diagnosis, was I just amped up everything that's already inside of me to a whole nother like reality. And that's what I've been doing over these last few months. I've been vulnerable and gone public. I keep showing up and teaching story through inspirational moments. I don't show up going, whoa me, I'm going through ovarian cancer. I don't think any of my things, because I know that people call me out on it, starting with people like Rachel. Rachel be like, "Hey, girl, take me by the earlobe and go like, yeah, no, no,
Well,
you don't need the
you
victim
have
shit."
you have an important tagline here in your statement. You know, Camp Fifi Uncensored. When you say uncensored, what comes to my mind is that you have the bravery to not censor yourself like so many of us do. You know, like that's a battle I have, you know, breaking out of my own comfort zone, my own shell. You know, that's why I put those videos up, you know, on my Instagram and on my, you know, and I'm just putting myself out there because I don't have time to be afraid anymore. I don't have time. I've got a message to send to people. And I know that's what you're doing right now. You have this message that you need to get out there, and there's no time to be worried about what people are going to think about you. There's no time to be thinking about, you know, oh, is this going to go anywhere? It's just like, no, it's a full on, all out assault on getting stuff done and having a purpose in this life to change the world and make it a better place because it's so needed. You know, I think, you know, we are all too caught up in this idea that that other people, their opinions matter. And at the end of the day, it's like, no, that's not how it works. You know, it's like you have one life to live. And so get your voice out there. If you have something to say, you have something to contribute, you have something that's going to help this world, get out there and get going. There's always going to be the people that are going to put you down. You're always going to have the haters, you know, and if you have haters, like they say, that's a good thing, right? So
Yeah.
I always say, you know, so you're right now, you know, you're the host of the Camp Fifi Uncensored podcast, and where are you seeing this go? Where are you going to take this thing?
Well, it's interesting. So I am a professional makeup and hair artist in the film and television world. That's where I've made my primary living. And I have done that for over 30 years. And I have a private studio where I service clients, and I've traveled the world taking care of clients from private to, you know, in film and television. And that's still my career as of right now. While also producing now as we speak. We've dropped in less than a year and a half, 75, 76 episodes every week. Um, and we're on every listening platform from Apple, Google, Anchor, Spotify, and YouTube. And it's really exciting because, as you said, Can't Be Uncensored is exactly the platform where I'm not censored and nobody else is for that matter. It's where we can really have authentic, organic conversations. And more importantly, what we're lacking connection and we're lacking conversations and we're lacking taking a chunk of time out of our day or our life to actually sit down and have a really great exchange. And that's why I say to people, you're joining me around a campfire for an uninterrupted 2 hours. We're really going to do a connection. And people are like, I don't even know what the hell I'm going to talk about for 2 hours. I'm like, that's not your problem. Don't worry about it. Just breathe. Just show up. We're going to have a great time. And then they're dumbfounded because they have no idea where that time went. They cannot believe the things we talked about. I, you know, put people at ease and make people feel safe. It's something that I've always done ever since I can remember, way since I was a little girl. Why people sought me out. It's probably why people come and sit in a chair where they can be loved on, where they feel good, they look good, they feel heard, they, you know, and I'm always myself and I'm always just straight up and I'm not harsh about it, but I also don't like to dance around things. It doesn't interest me, which is made for sometimes an interesting ride being in the film and television industry because, you know, um
That's what you're
it's
doing.
not always a place. It's not always a place, first off, depending upon the entity, the individuals that you're dealing with in whatever positions where you can do that. And I really needed a platform where I could be my pure self. But more importantly, it wasn't about me. It was about this calling that kept showing up, showing up, showing up. And that goes back to like now, probably about 9 or so years ago, where ironically, before podcasts had taken off and were a familiar word in the language that we speak, I said to a dear friend of mine who we had a stream of consciousness conversation every time we were together, we need to do a podcast. And he was like as if I just spoke to Hebrew to him. And he was like, I don't even know what you just said to me. And I was like, a podcast is something like, imagine a radio show, but you get to create it in your own waveform, time, all the things. But you just sit around and you just have a conversation that's recorded. And he looked at me like, wow, that's genius. And I was like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's just record ourselves and see what we think. And we did. And it was a bomb, what it was in the moment. And I couldn't stand hearing my voice and all the things. And I was like, well, yeah, that's not happening. So much for that idea. And literally life went on and it got busy and lots of responsibilities, taking care of a mother who got sick over the next X amount of years and taking her through that last transition of her life through 5 strokes and being her medical POA and providing her all the things while working 80 hours a week and having my marriage and our babies, our fur babies, and managing a lot of things. And the pandemic hit. And as I started expanding my communities through social media, where a lot of people were turtling, I was like, all right, let's do this messy. Let's do this uncomfortably. Let's do this not perfectly. And being a Virgo, perfect is like something you try to always show up be. And let's do this in ways that are just like, you've got to grow. You've got to find out, you've got to create other businesses. You've got to create. And I'm just a natural, creatively driven person. I don't like to sit around and stare at my navel. It's not comfortable for me. And it's not like I can't get quiet, because I could sit quietly in the middle of the woods, no problem. But when I'm in the productive, driven state of solving problems, it's kind of like that, like the men said, being me in the boxing ring, like I'm so focused, I have this mean look. And those were my survival mechanisms. That's what I learned as a child. Like, how do you solve these problems? Okay, now your parents have divorced, they've lost all your businesses. I was working at 14 for my family's business. My father was signing checks for the whole store. His employees who'd worked for him for 25 years. And I was making the most money on the floor, making the highest sales. And he turned to me one day as he's writing out the checks and he said, you can't do this. And I was like, really? Why? He says, because it doesn't look good amongst everybody that's worked here. And I said, really? Well, who's going to put the roof over the head and our food on our table? And he was shooken. He was just shooken. And I was 14. It was the summer before he died. He was just shooken. He was like, there was nothing he could say. And he knew that I was stepping in because he was hurting. It was a business. He was so like, it defined him and he needed help. And I was his wingman. And I was coming in. I call myself a pitch hitter. I swoop in and I spread magic fairy dust. Like I don't think I'm some perfect entity of this way in making. I think that that's just who I intentionally, unconsciously have been formulated to be in all the different environments I'm in, and somehow eventually magically allows to be like, it just can't help itself. You can be the one who quietly walks in the room and there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people in there with lots and lots of ego and lots of experience and lots of accomplishment. And somehow I will always find myself at the front of the room on the stage, winning, leading, whatever. And I know that about me. And I need to give myself permission to always be in those positions for the reasons that are for the good of all, in a way that's really humbling and really like, is healing. it's healing a consciousness, is healing in a, whether you call it a metaphysical, because it's not, it's my science and my metaphysical and my soul and all the things that I've learned that culminated into what I call a living sculpture, as I've referred to before, into try this cookie because this might be the thing that tastes good and is exactly what you needed, but the cookie is not the cookie like the classic Sicilian yummy cookie I grew up with. It's like so much deeper than that. Like it looks like a cookie, but it's taking care of 12 other things. Like that's who I am. So it's funny because I've just had a breakthrough with an idea that all these things have been kind of formulated into, and I'm looking to explore what that's going to show up looking like. And it's a derivative off of this podcast and off of my name, that's nickname that I've received over the years, one of which is Fifi. And going more deeply into the teaching and the entertaining and the healing and all the things that I trained to be a director really early on when female directors weren't allowed. And so that's why I went off into the hair and makeup division to be in this realm so I could be a storyteller that I was trained to be since, again, little girl. But I was being told I couldn't be. So I've been around a lot of male locker rooms, so to speak, for many, many years, trying to find my way. And it's ironic because I've seen even these more recent times with diversity and inclusivity issues with different cultures and different playing fields and different opportunities. I came into a world that I was one of 3 women on my first film set as a head of my department. And because I know how to work with men and get on with men, it was not a big deal. And it didn't matter if I had long blonde hair and wearing leggings and, maybe looking attractive to some people, even as a fuller figure girl or whatever, young woman. I still knew what I was doing. I still showed up clear as a designer and taking care of managing a department and running a show in a manner that delivered. I had a product to deliver. I had millions of dollars on my shoulder to deliver. I delivered. And I'm at this place in my life where it's like, I want to come into myself. I want to come into myself so I can tell those stories. And the way those stories are going to get told is first and foremost writing them myself, because there lies the power of like the creation. So for you, the podcast, writing your system, writing the cookbooks, doing all that creation, all those planting those seeds stems from those inner thoughts coming out onto thoughts that can be then shared with the masses. Mm-hmm. And those are the things that I did really scared 3 years ago after my mom died 2 weeks before our country shut down. I kept getting her voice saying, you need to write, you need to write, you need to write, because she always believed in me as a writer. She hated the fact that I went into the realm that I went into, in the division I went into, because she knew it didn't use my intellect and my heart and all the things. She could see me being put into these small, uncomfortable boxes that people had the power to be abusive and diminish and lessen and all the things that she knew that I wasn't, here to be. And I, over the last few years, which led me, interestingly enough, to this phase of going through ovarian cancer, to be finally at a place where when I started sharing my story publicly from my hospital bed, I had already built, as I made the running joke, a whole whopping 2 followers, which I know that that's not the case, but I'm not in hundreds of thousands, I'm not in millions, and I'm not really a TikTok girl for reasons that I just intuitively feel like have always kind of in the back of my mind said, stay away from, even though people blow up. But I just have my own reasons for why I've hesitated. But all the other ways I've allowed myself to just like you mentioned, uncomfortably, without worrying about what other people think, shown up and drop little golden nuggets. And whether one person thinks it's a golden nugget or 100 people think it's a golden nugget, it's my truth. It's my coming from my heart. I'm not making a dime off of it. All of this stuff is like seeding lots of thoughts out into the world, no different than anybody else who's been an author or a novelist or a script writer or whatever, and see where it lands. And hope that it materializes. Going back to where do I see the podcast? I've often talked with my producers about, you know, I in my last year or two in college happened to be in a building in Chicago where friends of mine and I were gathered, and it was in one of our friends' family's condo, and this condo was in one of the wealthiest buildings in all of Chicago called Water Tower Place. And our friend whose home we were in was had materialized this home because Ray Kroc, who started McDonald's, had plucked this couple out of Ohio, sent them to England to launch McDonald's. And McDonald's made them multi-millionaires, which allowed them to live as lavishly as they were living. And as we're sitting there hanging out as college mates, doing our thing, high up in the sky, does it get mentioned that this woman has moved in across the hallway? Random drop of information, and her name happens to be Oprah. Well, Oprah at the time in 1983, nobody knew. Nobody knew. Oprah was a little local show in Chicago that nobody knew past the Chicagoland area, if that. And I knew someone was going to blow up and become exactly who we know her to be today. And my friends were like, I was like, Oprah, this woman's gonna like become something. And they're like, yeah, whatever, Felicia, just smoke another joint, like whatever, Felicia. And I was like, no, seriously, she's gonna. Well, I was a kid who, as many of us grew up around a lot of really great talk show hosts. I was a kid who really, really loved the format of the talk show. And I really loved being entertained, and I really loved hearing what people said. And I really loved hearing how people got from square A to B to C to D. And that's what I leaned into. And because I was curious by nature, loved people, and loved to know what made people tick, that was my that's really like to the core who I am. That's why I love to sit down and break bread with people and just have a great conversation. That's why this podcast is such a perfect platform for me. That's why I see it creating into something way, way bigger than probably my dreams can imagine. I have it all written down. But I hand wrote a letter and I slipped it under her door that day. And I told her what my vision was and what I wanted to do and how I wanted to align with her. And I ended up working with her then executive producers who made her into the Harpo Studios and integrated her into all the things she became years later. And they wondered if I ever heard from her. And I could have probably worked with her in Chicago, but our stars never crossed. And I thought that was really interesting because it was a very small market that it would have been really easy to have crossed. And it didn't. And I think that there were very valid reasons why they didn't. And I'll keep that to myself. But for the reasons being that I think it's great that she's become all the things she's become and influenced all the people she's influenced, and hopefully more positive than not. And I still have those kind of big visions and dreams. And I have a lot of visions, and a lot of those visions become reality. And when they're coming in strong and hot, it's almost earth shaking to me that I'm even having these kind of experiences, and I've been having a lot of those experiences lately, and I think it's because I'm in this space right now that I get to like I'm I'm just pouring out just what's channeling through, and I just want to see where that heads, where that leads me to, and who's with me in the, on this journey. And I can honestly say I feel very fortunate for who's in my camp right now and the incredible, amazing spirits that have I've drawn in and integrate, including you and Rachel, because it's healthy people. People who've done the work. I want to be with people who've done the work. You got to be willing to have done the work.
Yeah.
And the work never ends until our final breath. And
Nope,
so
never
once you
ends.
realize that,
Never ends.
you just know, like, don't get fucking all caught up in all the work because it's
Yeah.
ever never stops. Just never
No,
stops.
no, it never does. Well, that was an amazing journey with you. So where can people find you at? It's I know it's at Camp Fifi Uncensored. What's your Instagram? Is it the same or
My
what is your
Instagram is at Felicia Linsky, FELICIALINSKY, for both Instagram. Facebook is the same, Felicia Linsky. I do have a Camp BP Uncensored Instagram, but most of my stuff you'll see on my personal. And then
okay.
you can see my bios where you can link to all my things, all the things that I do. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
Well, it was great to sit down and connect with you. It's been, I think the last time we did this was I was on your podcast, and I think that was when was that? That was maybe kind of lost track of time. It's just been
I
a
want to
whirl.
say, I think we did something last fall.
Yeah, I think it was maybe in
I
the
think we
fall or
did it last
something.
fall.
Yeah,
Um, I know Rachel and I have done a couple, and I feel like that was the last time. It's hard to say because over the year, I think we've talked a couple of times
yeah, yeah,
since the launch. So, and I know we integrate quite a bit on a personal note as I'm training. But listen, it's been a great honor to do this with you, and
likewise.
what I appreciate, Jake, is, you know, who I get to show up sitting in front of you today versus even who when we first met. Um, I'm proud of the evolution, even through all the life wow moments. Like, who would have predicted, November 2021 when we first did interview on my podcast, that me at 199 pounds and thinking I knew all that in a slice of bread, would come back humbly several months later after I was starting to like get through, some of my stuff and release my weight and heal my knee and all the things, that I'd be coming at it from a very other insighted position. And then now here I am with that under my belt, but also now with the ovarian cancer journey, to have a whole nother perspective, along with a lot more building and freeing and expansion. But I think that goes for all of us. I've gotten to
Yeah,
see that with you guys as well, finding your space and your place in this newer world since the pandemic. you know, we all had to pivot, and some of us pivoted really well, and others still are staring at their navel, wanting to know when it's going to come back to normal.
yeah. Don't think that's happening.
Never. There's
So
no
yeah,
such
no,
thing.
I
And
we gotta take advantage of the opportunities that we're given, even if they're opportunities that may appear as if they're setting us back. There's a lesson to be learned, and we can apply that to our life and make our life better. And you're living proof of that. You've taken the most scariest of all things that could ever happen to someone, and you've turned it into a force to be reckoned with. And your bravery is just, it's something that should inspire just the whole world. People need to get inspired. People need to understand that they through their bravery their life changes. They got to take a step forward. They have to step forward, take control of their life, move their life forward, take care of business, take care of themselves, take care of the people, take care of the world, stand up for what they believe in. And I think that you've done just such an incredible job doing that. And and I know that Rachel and I just think the world of you, and just I wish you all the success that you can ever possibly imagine. I hope to be right alongside you and help carry your bags. So
I
whatever
do.
we got to do, and
We're going to be carrying each other's bags. We're going to be
yeah,
running through airports, laughing, going, we got to get to Copenhagen. We got to
yeah,
get to Stockholm. We got to get to Marrakesh. We got to get to, because we've got all these engagements to speak at.
yeah. Well, let's
Got
do
all
it.
these
Let's
places to go
book
and
the
see.
engagements. Book the
Yes.
engagements. I'm ready to go.
Yeah, I hear that loud and clear. And you know, I just want to say that for those who feel stuck or feel overwhelmed or feel like just it's too much, listen, I always share that, if we can just like step out of ourselves, out of our own way, and look up at the sky and realize there's a huge galaxy out there. The galaxy, I don't care whether you believe the earth is flat or round. You've been taught, I don't care what you think. Just go with me on this. All we are is energy. That's all we are. And all we are is a part of the galaxy. You don't have to believe in green little aliens showing up and dropping out of the sky, because I really don't. But what I do believe in when it comes to teaching about the galaxy and how we fit into that whole picture as energy, we're not meant to get stuck. We're meant to be shooting stars of energy and all that composite flying across the way all the time, never stopping. The galaxy never stops. Otherwise, if it hits, it's because it's busting into bigger, smaller, littler, whatever, and hitting different places, and becoming another source of energy. That's all we are, is energy. So to stay present, to stay in flow, to allow yourself to be like that lapping, balanced tundra of a river with that perfect rustling leaves and the birds singing and the beavers building their dams and the water levels just right and the smell just crisp and delicious. Live into those moments of those kind of visual things and carry yourself forward powerfully in whatever it is you're doing in your life, no matter what you need to apply it to, whether it's in your most immediate health and wealth, or your aspirations, or your learning tools, or how you integrate with people. Make it those kind of things that you're never to get stuck. And it's always about just flowing in this beautiful balance of nature and having those kind of visions around you, and let yourself be guided. Let go of all the bullshit and let yourself be guided in your pure truth, and listen to your gut. Let your gut be the number one thing that guides you. That's your truth. That's your pure self.
I love it. I love it. Love it. Yes. Let's do it.
Cheers.
I'm gonna go find myself a place right now, right after we're done here. So, all right. I love you.
Love you.
Great chatting with you, and I will just talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Jake. This has been
Oh,
such
you're
a
welcome.
pleasure.
Yeah, same here. Absolutely. All right.
Love
Have
you.
a great
Thanks.
rest of your week.
You
Okay.
too. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.